Hi, I'm Jim Brett, President and CEO of the New England Council. Thanks for tuning in to this month's episode of Inside the Corner Office, where we catch up with the leaders of some of our region's most well-respected businesses and organizations to learn more about their career paths and about the institutions they lead. This month, I had the opportunity to talk with one of the Council's 2024 New Englanders of the Year, retired Brigadier General Jack Hammond, the Executive Director of the Home Base Program. We had a great conversation about General Hammond's impressive military career and how it led him to the helm of Home Base, an incredible organization that supports veterans and their families as they grapple the invisible wounds of war. The General also shared some updates on Home Base's expansion, both here in New England and in other parts of the country, and offered his advice to the new Secretary of Veterans Affairs. As always, I thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. I've had the privilege of getting to know you and Home Base over the years, and I know that many in our region have some recognition of the organization, but I'm glad we have a chance now to take a deeper dive into some of the incredible work that you are doing at Home Base to support our nation's veterans and families. And first, we usually talk to our CEOs about their background and their career. And boy, you have had an incredible career, to say the least. Prior to joining Home Base in 2012, you served in the United States Army with honor and distinction for several decades. And I was just looking earlier today at just some of your military awards: Distinguished Service Medal, the Legion of Merit Medal for Combat Service, the Bronze Star Medal, the Meritorious Service Medals, the Army Commendation Medal for Valor, and on and on and on. So obviously a very distinguished career, to say the least. But tell us a little more about your career in the military.
Well, thanks, Jim, and really appreciate your friendship over the past 12 years. It seems like it was just yesterday I got here. But I had one of those interesting careers because, as like many people, when I joined for 4 years. I planned on doing my service, and it was a sense of dedication to the country, commitment to the country. I felt I grew up in a family that believes in public service. All my uncles served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and I just felt that that was part of what I needed to do, and then I'd figure out the rest later. And lo and behold, 31 years later, I was stepping away from the uniform. I had a very unique opportunity to serve in a couple different branches in the Army. I was a cavalry officer for a while. I was an infantry officer. I served in the military police. And there's all sorts of training that goes with that. And then when 9/11 hit, I ended up in those years in the last decade of service, getting 3 combat commands that I never would have thought when I was back, Jack Hammond at UMass, when I enlisted as a private my sophomore year at UMass. And all of those different trainings I did in the infantry, the cavalry, and the military police, and the counterterrorism work I did came together in the post 9/11 world, where we got engaged in this asymmetrical battlefield in 2 different theaters of war. And I had a unique preparation for that. And I kind of got that initial feel for the response force. My battalion deployed within hours of the second plane striking the World Trade Center. And I was tasked with securing critical sites here in the U.S. We didn't know how big those attacks were going to be. And so we were guarding everything from nuclear power plants to water reservoirs and key bridges, et cetera. And then within 30 days, we got a new set of orders to move into and secure 7 airports, one of which was Logan Airport here in Boston. And we've never used the military to guard our airports, even in World War II. And so we had to make it up and kind of figure it out on the move on how to do that. And that's one of the unique perspectives military leaders bring to the table. We're taught to adapt and overcome in austere, uncertain environments, and we were able to do that. I rolled right from that mission. That mission lasted about 9 months. And just as that wrapped up in June of 2002, I received orders to go into Afghanistan with the second wave of troops into Afghanistan. and my battalion was kind of broken up into several places, and we had units in a couple places in Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, doing security type operations. And as that mission wrapped up, I received orders to come back to the U.S., regroup for a month, and then prepare for the invasion in Iraq. So we went from one mission to another mission to another. And from 2001 to 2004, we were deployed. And I was part of the invasion into Iraq, which was one of those incredible experiences where, it was the third largest army in the world. People said we were going to have problems. And as you know, 4 weeks later, the ground war was won, but then we rolled into an insurgency war. And a lot of strategic decisions made at the White House and in the Pentagon that just that snatched victory, snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. The Bremer's decision to get rid of the Ba'ath Party members, any de-Baathification, to disband the Iraqi army. The Iraqi army was who we were supposed to turn things over to, and we were going to transition from 200,000 troops to 30,000 within 6 months. But we did that. We had no one to turn the country over to. Constabulary mission. Then I rolled through all that, and I was fortunate enough in the interim years to respond to the hurricane in New Orleans, provide security operations to the DNC, put all those overseas preparations back to work here in the U.S. I got a unique opportunity to go to Harvard for a year to do a national security fellowship there, and then fine tune a lot of the things I had practiced. Now I got to get the academic background, which set me up for success for that last deployment as a CG of Kabul province from 11 to 12. And during that time, I thought that was going to be a cakewalk. I'd been in Afghanistan in 2002. I'm coming back there 8 years later. I'm figuring everything's going to be, and I'm in the capital. I'm not down south where a lot of the stuff is going on. But the Taliban was trying to turn the apple cart over and convince everybody that Karzai could not even protect the capital. So there was a full court press. And in September of 2011, we had an 18-hour mini Tet offensive where the U.S. Embassy was under fire with rockets and machine gun fire for 18 hours, and NATO headquarters was under attack. And then 2 weeks later, we had a mass casualty suicide bombing that took 17 of our troops. And it's kind of sad because most Americans don't even know those things happen, which is, for guys, you can see how they can feel some frustration. And then as I got back from that, it's, you make that life pivot choice, right? And at 60 days of leave coming back from Afghanistan, and I was, my wife Colleen very well, and Colleen and I were having an adult beverage on our deck, looking over the reservoir, and she asked me when I was going to get out. I laughed. I'd been in 31 years. We met as lieutenants, and I said, "Get out!" And she laughed. And she said, "That ship sailed a long time ago, but what is it you haven't done you want to do that you haven't done yet? That you really have a burning desire." And after drinking, after thinking about it for an hour, I really didn't have that big job I wanted. I had done everything. I passed any goals I had. And I waited till the morning, rethought it again, and I sent the Chief of Staff of the Army a letter requesting early retirement because he told me a long time ago that you'll know when it's time.
Yeah,
when you have fire in your belly for a job, move out, and and by the way, no one sheds a tear when you step out of a general officer billet. There's a thousand that'll just give you a warm handshake and a pat in the back.
So how did, now that you made the decision to retire, how did home base come into your life?
Well, that's a great question. You know our good friend Michael Allard, who's the chief operating officer here.
Right.
When I got back from that last deployment, my family here in Massachusetts and a number of soldiers were from the Massachusetts region that were in my last command. They were from the Massachusetts National Guard. And we had started to see the beginning of the rise in suicides and mental health challenges and traumatic brain injuries that were going on there. And a lot of marriages were starting to fall apart. We had a few suicide attempts, and I was very concerned with that. I had actually, after that 3-year series of deployments in the early 2000s, had gotten some help for PTSD. I would tell you, I was voluntold by my wife, Colleen, who's a registered nurse, to get some care. It was the best thing I ever did because I realized at the point it's an injury, just like a fractured ankle. You can limp on it all you want, but you eventually got to get some help for it. And so I went to see, I had heard about home base. They had actually sent us a home base and a bunch of T-shirts, and we did a run to home base in Afghanistan, my first in 2011. And as I learned about the program, I came back and met with Michael to ask him what resources were available for these guys that were now on their third and fourth deployment from the Guard, and how we could help them. He showed me all the stuff. And then 2 weeks later, I was attending a 2-week professional development course at Harvard. And a friend came up to me and asked, he heard I was retiring, and he asked me if I had put in for the job with the Red Sox. And I laughed, and it was the beer and chicken season. I said, "Are they looking for a pitching coach?" Coach talked about home base. And so I gave Michael a call, and he told me that the Red Sox had hired a search committee, Heidrick and Struggles out of Chicago. And they had 25 retired admirals and generals that were, vying for the position. And I threw my hat in the ring, and I was successful after the 6 months of the search committee work. And I was honored to be asked by Tom Warner and Jack Connors to take the helm.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I've been fortunate to watch how home base has grown from its founding I think 16 years ago. But for those who are not familiar with the organization's origin, can you just share more about how home base even came about and the role that the Red Sox and Mass General has played?
Yeah, it's interesting. It is the best clinical program in the world for veterans, bar none. There's not even a close second. And what's interesting is it didn't originate with MGH. As you know, our good friend Tom Warner and the Red Sox, each World Series starting in 2004, 2007, 13, every time they won World Series, they have gone to the White House afterwards, and then they have gone to Walter Reed Army Medical Center to be with the troops, share the trophy, sign autographs. And after the 2007 World Series championship, they did that in 2008. But this time when they went to Walter Reed, it was the height of the surge in Iraq, and they had the highest number of catastrophically injured young people there, and they were moved to action. When they came back, Tom spoke with Ted Kennedy at the time, who was on both the Armed Services Committee and the Health and Human Services Committee. So he had a great vantage point of the challenges. And he recommended Tom meet with Peter Slavin from Mass General and see if they would develop a unique partnership between a professional baseball team and a hospital. And as Peter described it, it was a tough sell to the board. He told them it would lose money, it would bleed money, but it was the right thing to do. And they got a unanimous decision from the trustees at Mass General to move forward. And what started as a small outpatient clinic that would treat 200-300 people a year is now an international center of excellence that treats almost 4,000 people a year with Mass General Harvard level care, state-of-the-art innovative programs, all at no cost. And so every 2 weeks, we fly 24 veterans from across the U.S. and the world. The U.S. veteran can be anywhere in the world, and we will fly them in at no cost. And they will get a 2-week intensive clinical program for post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury that compresses 2 years of treatment into 14 days, which, it takes an organization like Mass General to develop something like that. And in the years, SEAL Team 6 reached out to us and asked us to build a comprehensive integrated polytrauma program for traumatic brain injury. And through that program now, 8 special operations team members come to Boston every single week for care. We treat about somewhere around 4,000 people a year, and we have collaborative programs that we've grown in other cities that have problems but no resources. We've helped build programs. As Jack would say, the ocean is large and our ship is small. We wanted to grow capacity in great places, and so we now have collaborative programs all across Southwest Florida, in Arizona, and in Texas.
Right. And what about the population itself? At one time, I remember that it was mostly men that were coming in for services, mental health, wellness. But I think I read somewhere where more and more women in the military are now coming in. Is that true?
They are, especially here. So women are somewhere around 12 to 15% of the DOD. 20% of our patients are women. And one of the reasons for that is they really don't care for going to the VA for a range of reasons. And for us, I think we give them that opportunity to complement the work the VA does. The VA has a phenomenal challenge. I wouldn't want their challenge. I mean, they want to do that, Congress tells them to do something and then they try and fix it and then they tell them they can't do that. I wouldn't want to be encumbered by their bureaucracy. We've got the freedom of maneuver of a nonprofit private sector entity where we're able to do that. But the average, we now have we've developed specialized program for underserved groups of veterans. So veterans in general are underserved, but then we found different groups like women veterans. So we create 2 or 3 of those cohort groups a year are for all women. Based upon some work we did last year, we found out there's another niche of special operations team women who are in the Rangers, who are special operations pilots that need, a little bit more unique care. So we've done that for them. We did an all Spanish speaking cohort from a group from Puerto Rico. And these, as we all know, Puerto Rico oftentimes gets the short end of the stick. We saw from the heart, some of the other areas, their access to care isn't great in a lot of areas. So we have a Spanish speaking cohort because when these veterans go home back to the island, they go back to speaking Spanish again most of the time. And, English can be a little tricky. So we tailored to them. We have a Native American veteran program. Native Americans constitute the highest per capita membership in the military of any ethnicity in the country. And they have the worst access to care. Navajo Nation is who we initially partnered with. It's the size of New England minus Maine, and it has 3 community hospitals to take care of the whole place. 3 to 4 hour drive to get to a small community hospital that doesn't have the resources you need. And so we built programs for them. And of course, our special operations team members. We have the highest number of Green Berets, Delta Force, Navy SEALs of any program in the nation.
Wow. You mentioned the growth earlier. I know that your facility here in Charlestown expanded significantly back in October, adding, I think, the 3rd floor. Can you tell us a little more about the new space and how it will enable home base to better serve the veterans?
So I think we all have seen the tragedies from the last couple of weeks. And as we peel the onion back and we look at that Green Beret who took his own life and then blew up his truck in front of Trump's hotel in LA, in Las Vegas, rather. When you read the backstory on this thing, he had received significant traumatic brain injuries. He had some mental health challenges from moral injuries because he talked about the fact that he participated in some really dark operations in Afghanistan. And then there's corresponding health issues that go along with that. And as you know, our good friend, Dr. Ross Safont, the former president of Spaulding Rehab and the chairman of the Department of Harvard Medicine's Department of Rehab, Ross figured out, working with the NFL concussion program, that repetitive concussive injuries results in a shortened lifespan and a shortened health span, which is the number of years you're injury or chronic disease free. So for example, you can live to 80, but if you're in a vent for 20 years, you have a terrible health span. In this case, they have a shortened lifespan and health span by 9 years because of the injuries they sustained in the military. And what they're finding is, beyond when we think of a traumatic brain injury, we think the concussive effect, we think of cognitive impact of that. What we found is it also leads to challenges with pain management. It messes up people's sleep, which then messes up their behavioral health, that messes up their cognitive function. We've also seen high rates of cancer. We've seen higher rates of hypertension, diabetes, and all these other issues nobody's looking at. And again, when nested within the Harvard Medical School community here at the Mass General Brigham, we've got the best people looking at these things. So we've been working on this for about 5 years. What happened to that guy, the type of injuries he had that nobody was caring for, we've been treating now for 5 years through that program that SEAL Team 6 asked us to build. So that 3rd floor that you talked about is the realization of bringing in all the latest in technology and to provide us the space to double the number of special operations team members we see every week, because they have the highest acuity levels of these injuries based on the fact that they have 5,000 jumps out of a plane when a kid that goes into the 82nd Airborne might have 500, who's a paratrooper. And then they've blown up so many things. They've had so many concussions from bouncing off the ground and blowing stuff up that they've had these long-term chronic illnesses and injuries that have gone undetected. And what happens is, instead of seeing some of these long-term injuries like hypertension and diabetes that you might see in your late 60s, they're seeing them in their 40s and early 50s. And so if we can get after these and leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence and working with Mass General's precision medicine team, our goal is to embark upon a super transformative research program where we can use this large data set of the 700 folks we've already seen and then expand on that to find out what exactly is causing these problems, and then how do we mitigate them at the earliest opportunity, so that if somebody has the very, very early signs of diabetes in their early 30s, we mitigate it before it even becomes a problem. Or when their blood pressure starts going up even a little, and we know that's one of the results, before they get to a point where they're damaging their heart, we get them on a statin, or we do something with them to prevent that from ever even happening.
You know, I know the home base started here in Boston, but your footprint has expanded, to say the least. I mean, I was reading earlier about your presence in Florida is extraordinary there, absolutely extraordinary. But that's just one example. Tell us a little more about that footprint and how it has expanded in the last several years.
Sure. So, as a lot of people know, Southwest Florida, Naples and Fort Myers, there's a millionaire's playground in the winter, and a lot of places go down there fundraising for 6 weeks. The highest concentration of billionaires in the country every 6 weeks move to Naples and Fort Myers. And so home base like Mass General and other places go down there and they have, fundraising dinners, et cetera. We felt kind of bad about the fact that we were doing that, but we weren't giving anything back to the community. And a good friend of mine, General Fred Franks, who led U.S. forces during Desert Storm, and when they defeated the Iraqis in 5 days, General Franks reached out and said, "We got to do more. We got to do better." And so we created a series of programs down there to help the veterans. And it started with wellness-based programs and fitness-type programs to kind of get them back in shape. And then we partnered with the Lee Healthcare System, which was our first extramural partnership. And Florida was number 50 out of 50 in mental health in the country. And so he was excited to partner with Mass General and home base. And they had a brand new behavioral health clinic. We took 5 of their clinicians, flew them up to Boston, trained and certified them in trauma therapy for PTSD. And then we told them we would buy 1 day of their salary each week so that veterans could go to their hospital and get care for free. The other 4 days a week, they could now treat the local population for trauma from car wrecks, assaults, any type of physical attack, and they didn't have that capability. So it was a win-win. We built capability within the community to serve the veterans, but also serve the community. And then that expanded 6 months later in Naples. Another hospital reached out and said, "Can we do that? We heard what you did there. Can you do that with us?" Train 5 more people. Then the folks from Tampa General Hospital in Tampa reached out. And more recently, in Pensacola, we worked with the hospital system there. While all this was going on, Governor Ducey from Arizona reached out, and he had talked with our good friend, Governor Baker, and he had talked to Florida as well. And he found out what we were doing, and he said, "Would you be willing to do that with us?" And we started a partnership with the Honor Healthcare System, Arizona State University. We have a program on Arizona State. And just this year, we started beginning plans that we'll open up an operation in Houston with Medinger Hospital and a few other folks out there working with our partners from the Blue Angels Foundation.
And I think you received $2 million in state funding from Florida. They bought into the idea that what you wanted to promulgate. So that's good. That's good news.
Yeah, they love that. So it's an interesting ground game on the government relations side. Here in Massachusetts, it began with Charlie Baker. He put us into the budget, and the state legislature had been amazing in supporting this. When Governor came in, she upped it, and the state legislature once again supported it. And through that money, we guarantee that every Massachusetts veteran, no matter where they Adams to Charlestown, can get the same telehealth appointment from Mass General at no cost. And we're expanding. We actually put one of our home-based social workers out in Western Mass. We train them, certified, and we pay the salary because they just don't have a physical presence of a healthcare provider out there. And once she's able to deliver care not only to the veteran, but other folks that have trauma-related injuries. And it's a highly scalable model that we've been able to export now to Florida, where Governor DeSantis and the state legislature said, "We love this because you're building capability across the state." And we when you see a good idea and it's not expensive, we keep going back to them, say we can grow it, and they'll say, okay, what about over here? What about over Tallahassee? So I think there's a lot more work in Florida, and we'll be flying out to Texas next week to talk to the governor's office about getting some government state funding to support this. So it's a balance between private sector funds, state, and fortunately, through the support of Senator Warren, she's been able to give us some substantial federal funding to deliver the national program.
Good. That's great. I know that you're very, very proud of the home-based new health span initiative. What are the goals of that new initiative of yours?
So I think HealthSpan is the future, and we're an agile, nimble organization as a private sector kind of startup. We're able to leverage the smartest folks at Harvard to figure out what's the future. And right now, HealthSpan is the future. Our goal with that is to go transition from a reactive, responsive medicine where the horse is out of the barn, you got to chase them down and bring them in and give medicine, to identifying what are the issues causing these problems, and then identify the sleep challenges, the mental health challenges, the cognitive function, improve cognitive function, and then address those chronic injuries and illnesses like diabetes, hypertension, cardiac issues, neurocognitive issues, so that they never diminish the person's lifespan and health span. So we're going to get more proactive in this thing and develop mitigation strategies so that while they're still serving, we'll treat them before it becomes a problem. We'll look for them and again, we live in a world with machine learning and AI where you can really leverage and muscle big data sets to kind of get granular to like what is specifically the problem, and then what is the best tool to treat it so you don't have that shotgun approach. And our ultimate goal will be within the military and the veteran community is to significantly reduce suicides, which we've lost 150,000 veterans to suicide since 9/11. We continue to lose somewhere between 20 and 30 veterans every single day. And then the second one is to address the complicated injuries associated with repetitive blast injury and concussive injury. Those are the two signature wounds we see, and we know they're reaching because if they go untreated, people lose hope. And when they lose hope, they do something really unfortunate like what happened in Las Vegas. But here in Massachusetts, we lost an amazing young veteran in Avon Christmas Eve. He had twin babies on the way. He was a firefighter in Avon, great kid, multiple combat deployments, and he lost his fight on Christmas Eve, which is just a tragedy.
Well, in the years since you began at home base, have you seen a shift in the general awareness and understanding of that invisible wounds of war?
I think we have. And our big worry is so many people are aware of it. We were worried about mission fatigue, where people, you kind of, everyone's hearing about it, and then eventually kind of fade back. But the sad truth is, we keep having these reoccurring national tragedies. Had that gentleman up in Maine a couple of years ago with the mass shooting, and Senator Collins was deeply concerned over that. And it was repetitive blast injury. He was working with detonation of hand grenades on a range over and over and over. And when they autopsied his brain, they found that he had considerable CTE. And then more recently, we had this issue. But it seems that all too often we're losing all these people. We've had protest suicides on VA properties, and we had one over in JP about 3 years ago, where people were so dissatisfied and angry at the lack of care, they would kill themselves on the VA property to send a message. And frankly, that's pretty clear. That's what happened in Las Vegas. That he was taking his life, but he was trying to raise the alarm of the issue that affecting his brothers. So I think it's a tragedy that these stories keep coming up, but it's a sense of frustration. I think we're looking at some dangerous headwinds coming up. There's been some talk with the new administration in the Project 2025 business where they're looking to cut veterans benefits. That is a very bad idea. We're already not doing enough to take care of the folks that served for 20 years. They're not looking for parades. They're not looking for medals. They're just looking to be made whole after their service. And if you don't do that, I think you're going to see more of these cases where people are going to express their dissatisfaction in a bad way. I think it's a dangerous move to even talk about cutting veteran benefits, like cutting their disability checks and their access to care. It makes no sense to me for folks that purport to want to be patriots and serve our veterans. It seems like a dangerous road to go down.
I totally agree. I understand that you were in DC recently advocating for more federal funds for home base. Tell us a little more about those efforts and how, the additional federal funding will help you continue and grow these programs.
So, I went down there just before Christmas. So, and as you can imagine, it's an interesting time in Washington.
Right. I agree. Yeah.
We try and stay out of politics here at home base,
Right.
just like you do.
Yep.
And we met with both Republican and Democratic senators and members of Congress, and it was interesting to feel the vibe down there. On the reassuring side, we still have a Congress, and it's still the People's Congress, and they know there's things that they can do and things that they're not going to do, and I think those will be the guardrails that keep us in place, and they've been the guardrails that kept this nation in place, since the initial Constitution was signed. I'm concerned about some stuff I see, but I also know that I have faith in the country to kind of withstand some of this stuff. We've got folks on both sides of the aisle that are deeply concerned about our veterans. Senator Warren is leading the charge, and there are many, and Senator Ernst on the Republican side, and Scott from Florida, both chair the same committee with her. Deep interest in finding new solutions to these problems that have kind of evaded a solution for 20 years. The challenge I think we see is we have invested billions and billions of dollars. The VA budget has grown from 40 billion to 300 billion over the past, 400 billion in the past 20 years. I don't know another business that couldn't solve their problems if their budget went from 40 billion to 400 billion, but the bureaucratic impediments are just clogging it up. And the DoD is going through a massive shift right now from a 20-year battle against terrorists to a potential World War III, fighting with Russia, fighting with China, fighting with North Korea, all at the same time. And so they've got their hands full just trying to reorganize and kind of reorient the DoD for potential global war of a conventional side. They don't have as much time or energy to invest in this, but I can tell you, talking to the leaders, they're deeply troubled by the fact that they have not, despite all their investments, been able to curtail the suicides on the active duty side. And they're seeing more of these problems. So we have eager friends within the DoD. We have kind of a standoffish thing over at the VA. They're trying to do it themselves, and I just wish they would take our help a little bit more than they do. But I understand that they've got problems I don't have to deal with.
Yeah, right.
But having got our good friends in Congress and the Senate and the House that are committed to this, I think, and I'm hopeful, we'll be able to receive the funding to continue to innovate and develop these new solutions that we can pass off to both the DoD, to the VA, and all these different communities.
Yeah. Well, that was my final question, is that, as you know, we have a new administration in DC. We have a new Secretary of Veterans Affairs, former Congressman from Georgia, Doug Collins. What advice would you give him if he called you to say, tell me some ways I can best support veterans and their families?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. And I'll tell you what I've shared with the past 3 VA secretaries, and I think the answer to the test. Number one, like any other area of business in this country, certainly after 2020, everybody had to rethink of how they operated because we went digital. There was so many different things that caused us to change. The world changed. But really, that transformation began in the early 2000s. The problem we have is the VA is still operating like it did in the 1990s, structurally. They have their castles in different places in the country with a moat around them, and you have to come there for care, and it's an old model of care. Every other hospital system in the United States has gone to a decentralized approach. And as you probably can well see in my own institution at Mass General Brigham, there are Mass General urgent care programs all across southern New Hampshire, all across Massachusetts. So you don't have to come to the hospital on the main campus property to come here for a fever or a sprained ankle or a fractured wrist, right? if you use the million gazillion dollar equipment in the main campus, which should be reserved for those very complex illnesses and injuries, the urgent care things can take care of the other stuff. And so my recommendation would be for the VA secretary to consider our model. We're a center of excellence for veterans nested within a hospital system in academic medicine. We have access to all the best resources in the world by nesting within here, right? And they could easily, in all 10 FEMA regions in this country, there is a premier hospital system like Mass General Brigham. And I would recommend that they sell off all their properties. It's all outdated. Take that money and put it into a capital trust. And then just like we built this center of excellence for a fraction of the cost of a new big building somewhere else, build a VA center of excellence in each of the 10 FEMA regions, and then have a contract relationship with that system where you're able to access their doctors, their researchers, and their care providers to not only treat these complex injuries, but use their urgent care system to treat the veterans where they live in the local communities for the minor chronic conditions. So I think looking at home base as a model, they could in each FEMA region and focus on have the VA providers in Boston, in each major city, treating the most complex in partnership with the academic medical center.
Now, was that something you suggested to the previous secretaries of Veterans Affairs? Yeah.
Yeah. Not interested.
Yeah, right. I mean,
it's a big change.
Yeah.
But, maybe, and I'm not for privatizing the VA.
Right.
I think it does, but I think how you do it. And by the way, when Omar Bradley took over the VA in the 1950s, he had 20 million veterans he was responsible for caring for. And they were the combat veterans from World War I, World War II, and Korea. Some pretty heavy load there, right? Same, 20 million. That's about what we have today. And what he said, we need to focus on the combat injuries, not the chronic conditions. There's other people can do chronic conditions. We need to be experts on this. And what they did, they had the first hospital system, inpatient hospital system for combat wounded people in the world. The U.S. built that with the VA system. And then by the 1990s, because we never had another major war, they were still treating those same folks, and it transitioned to a geriatric outpatient program. So when the war started in 2001, the VA was a geriatric outpatient chronic care program, and they weren't positioned to respond. And frankly, they made that transition. And we all know the veteran population is much different now than it was in the 1950s.
Yeah.
And so you can't look at that isolated, geographically segmented structure. You need to spread it out so you can improve access to any veteran anywhere in the country.
Well, General, thank you for taking the time to join me today. And perhaps more importantly, thank you and your entire team at Home Base for the incredible work that you continue to do each and every day to support the families and veterans. And that's one of the reasons why the New England Council is very proud to salute you this past year and give you the prestigious New England of the Year award to you, because the extraordinary work, again, that you have done in your whole life, your career has been very impressive, to say the least. And we are so grateful for all that you do for the community here and at large.
Well, thank you, Jim. And that was a great honor for me personally, my family, and Home Base in general to receive the recognition from you all.
Well deserved.